Let's be honest, years after the fiery finale of Game of Thrones, a lot of us are still mad about it. The smoke has cleared, but for so many, the disappointment is still smouldering. The backlash was swift and brutal, and it's permanently stained the legacy of a series that once defined television. It felt rushed. It felt like a betrayal. It felt like the characters we'd spent a decade with were thrown away for cheap shock value. But what if the problem wasn't just the destination, but how fast we were rocketed towards it? What if, with a little time and a closer look at the clues planted way back in Season 1, the most hated parts of the ending actually start to make a scary amount of sense? Now, this isn't an excuse for the rushed pacing or clunky dialogue. We're not letting the writers off the hook. Instead, think of this as a post-mortem now that the collective rage has died down. We're going back to the beginning to trace the threads that lead directly to the ending we got. We're going to reframe the show's most controversial moments, not as a betrayal, but as the brutal, bittersweet, and strangely logical conclusion to the Song of Ice and Fire. Let's kick things off with the moment that shattered the fandom, Daenerys Targaryen, the breaker of chains, burning King's Landing to a crisp. The biggest complaint is that her heel turn from hero to villain was unearned, a sudden snap that ignored 8 seasons of character growth. It felt cheap, like they needed a last-minute boss for Jon Snow to fight, but was it really that sudden? Or were we so in love with her hero story that we chose to ignore the massive trail of ashes she left on her way to the throne? From day one, Dany's motto wasn't "let's talk it out," it was fire and blood. Remember Season 1? She watches her own brother Viserys get a crown of molten gold, and her reaction is ice cold. He was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon. That wasn't just a badass one-liner, it was a mission statement. It showed us her belief that she was above it all, and it revealed a chilling acceptance of brutality as long as it was aimed at her enemies. She wasn't her brother, but she was every inch a Targaryen. We remember her journey through Essos as this grand liberation tour, but it was also a tour of brutal revenge. Just look at the body count. She crucified 163 masters in Meereen. When she torched the Khals in their temple, we cheered. When she fed a master to her dragons, it felt like righteous victory. We loved her ruthlessness because her targets were so cartoonishly evil that we never stopped to ask what would happen when that same righteous fury was pointed at a city full of people who were just in her way. The warning signs got even brighter when she finally got to Westeros. In Season 7, she tortures the Lannister army and gives the survivors a choice: bend the knee or die. When Randall and Dickon Tarly refused, her own hand, Tyrion, begged her for mercy. Send them to the wall, hold them prisoner, anything but this. Instead, she had Drogon burn them alive. This wasn't a tactical move, she'd already won. It was a terror tactic, a dark echo of her ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, and a terrifying preview of what was coming. So when we get to King's Landing in the final season, Dany is not the same person she was. She's isolated, grieving, and paranoid. She's lost 2 dragons, her oldest friend Jorah, and her closest companion Missandei. She's just learned that the man she loves, Jon Snow, actually has a better claim to the throne, threatening her entire life's purpose. The Northern Lords don't trust her, and she's convinced that in Westeros, she has no love, only fear. It was the only tool she had left. Then the bells ring. Surrender. For Tyrion, this means they've won while saving innocent lives, but for Daenerys, it's the ultimate insult that Red Keep, the castle her family built, stands there as a symbol of everything that was taken from her. In that moment, with the bells of a surrender she didn't conquer ringing in her ears, and Missandei's last word, Dracarys, in her head, all her grief, rage, and generational trauma boil over. The burning of King's Landing isn't a moment of madness. It's the horrifying, tragic fulfillment of her lifelong philosophy. The world is remade only through fire and blood. Maybe the biggest clue of all was hiding back in Season 2 in the House of the Undying. Dany sees a vision of the Iron Throne Room destroyed and covered in what looks like snow. For years we all assumed it was a prophecy about the Night King, but it wasn't snow, it was ash. Her ash. The vision wasn't a warning about an enemy, it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. She was always the storm. In the end, Drogon melts the Iron Throne, the very thing that drove her to her doom, destroying the symbol of power before flying away, leaving the broken world to the survivors. If Dany's ending was a wildfire explosion, Jon Snow's was a quiet, unsatisfying fizzle. Here he is, Aegon Targaryen, the true heir to the Iron Throne. His parentage was the show's biggest secret, the twist that was supposed to change everything. And his reward for saving the world from ice zombies and then again from a tyrant. Exile. Back to the Wall, back to the Night's Watch. It felt like a narrative dead end, like his entire heritage ultimately meant nothing. But that feeling comes from fundamentally misunderstanding Jon's character. His story was never about chasing power. In fact, his entire life was defined by him rejecting it. He definitely never wanted to be king in the North. Power wasn't something he craved, it was a heavy cloak someone else always threw on his shoulders. He's a Stark in his soul, defined by honour, not a Targaryen defined by ambition. Revealing his parentage wasn't his golden ticket to the throne. It was the ultimate test of his character, forcing him into that classic Westerosi conflict, love versus duty. His own father, Rhaegar Targaryen, chose his love for Lyanna Stark over his duty to his kingdom, and that choice started a war that destroyed his family. In the end, Jon faces the exact same dilemma, his love for Daenerys versus his duty to the realm. He hears her promise to liberate the whole world, just as she liberated King's Landing, and he knows she won't stop. So he makes the opposite choice of his father. He chooses duty. He sacrifices his love to save the world. His Targaryen blood wasn't meant to make him a king. It was the key that allowed him to get close enough to Daenerys to stop her. And his Stark upbringing, the lessons of honour he learnt from Ned, gave him the strength to do what had to be done. He's the Song of Ice and Fire, not as a ruler, but as the tragic hero who had to kill the woman he loved. So is sending him to the Wall really a punishment, or is it a release? The Jon we know was never comfortable in the South. He was always an outsider. He found his first real family with the misfits of the Night's Watch, and later with the free folk. Being sent back to a wall that no longer has a purpose isn't a prison sentence, it's a homecoming. When he rides north of the Wall with Tormund and finally reunites with Ghost, he's shedding all the titles that have weighed him down. He's not Aegon Targaryen. He's not the Lord Commander or the King in the North. He's just Jon Snow, free. Take a second and look at that final shot of a green plant growing in the snow. It tells us the long winter is over. For Jon, a quieter spring has finally begun. And then there's the King, the moment that launched a million memes. In front of all the lords and ladies of Westeros, Tyrion asks, "Who has a better story than Bran the Broken?" And just like that, Brandon Stark, the weird, emotionless kid who spent 2 seasons staring into the void, is elected king. Seriously? Bran? It felt random, unearned, and deeply unsatisfying. Jon was the hero, Sansa was the politician, Dany was the conqueror. Bran was a walking plot device. His coronation felt like a bad joke. But Bran becoming king only makes sense if you remember the show's central promise, breaking the wheel. Dany wanted to break the wheel, but she just wanted to be the one on top. By choosing Bran, the Lords of Westeros do something genuinely revolutionary. They shatter the idea that power has to be inherited through blood or won with a sword. For the first time, they choose a leader on a completely different set of qualifications. Tyrion argues that stories are what unite people, and Bran is the keeper of all their stories. He's basically the human iCloud for Westeros history. He holds every mistake and every triumph in his memory. More importantly, he has no ambition, no ego, and no desire for power or wealth. He can't have children, which means the crown will no longer be passed down, ending the cycle of bloody family squabbles. His rule is a clean break from the violence that defined their world. He's impartial, incorruptible, and immune to the temptations that destroyed every ruler before him. His seeming passivity in the final seasons wasn't inaction. It was a long, silent game of chess. Think about his one weirdly assertive line right before the council. "Why do you think I came all this way?" That wasn't just a strange comment, that was a checkmate. It implies he saw this exact outcome and let everything unfold. Jon learning his heritage, Dany's tragic downfall, the Iron Throne melting into slag, because it was the only path to a new beginning. He's Bran the Broken, not just because of his legs, but because he's the one who finally broke the system. The story was never about finding the perfect hero king. The story was about how the Game of Thrones itself is the real villain, poisoning everyone who plays. The only way to truly win was not to play. Bran is the only one who exists outside that game. His election isn't a random twist, it's the logical end for a story that repeatedly showed us that good intentions and noble blood are no match for the corrupting pull of absolute power. They didn't just pick a new king, they picked a new kind of kingdom. When you look at it this way, through all the clues and themes, the ending of Game of Thrones starts to look different. It shifts from a rushed mess of character assassinations to a cohesive, if heartbreaking, conclusion. Daenerys' fall wasn't a sudden turn, it was the final, terrible act of a tragedy she'd been writing her whole life. Jon's exile wasn't a punishment, it was a bittersweet escape for a man who finally got to be free of a crown he never wanted. And Bran's coronation wasn't a joke, it was a radical attempt to stop the cycle of violence for good. In the end, the story wasn't about a single hero winning, it was about the pack surviving. The Starks who started the show, broken and scattered, are the ones left in charge. Sansa is the queen in the north. Arya is off exploring new worlds, Jon is free in the true north, and Bran is the king guiding the realm. The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives. Maybe the problem was never the ending itself, maybe the problem was us and what we expected. We wanted a classic fantasy where the handsome hero gets the throne and good triumphs over evil. Instead, we got a story that argued the system of power is the evil, and the only way to win is to tear it down completely. It wasn't the ending we wanted, but it might have been the ending the story deserved. But hey, that's just my attempt to make peace with it all. What do you think? Has time cooled you off on the finale, or do you still want to burn the script? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, I genuinely want to know. And if you like rethinking old stories, stick around and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching.